Action!
How do you get in and out?
Well, it's not pretty. No, it's nothing, is it?
Wow.
Stuff it. My best result for the whole year's racing was 1 lap of practice. 12 days a week, 7 hours a day I was doing. Michelin TRX, again, utterly
And on that note,
yeah.
I'm cutting. Hello, this is Vintage Velocity from the Vintage Sports Car Club. I'm Laura Plattman, and today I'm with Dougal Cawley. Hello.
Hello.
Dougal, you grew up with cars in your blood. Your father had a Lagonda. Just carry on. Tell me about your childhood with the Lagonda.
I think sort of probably before I was born, my dad's of the age where he was a teenager in the 50s, which is when, you know, vintage cars were a form of Bangonomics, and he just drove around in daft old Austin 7s that he'd buy with my uncle for a £5 and spank around a quarry, and he, you know, drove old Rileys and MGs and stuff in the 50s as everyday cars. And then he was into his Lagondas as well, because he couldn't quite afford a Fraser Nash. So he bought this Lagonda, which by now we're getting into the late 60s and early 70s. He did the terrible thing of taking it apart in his shed, so he was going to cut it down from a saloon into an open tourer, and then basically ruined his life by having children, which meant he didn't get out to his garage enough, and it stayed there festering for some considerable time. And we moved house with that car, and obviously, you know, Dad had 2 kids and moved house and stuff, so they flogged it towards the end of the 80s when the values of these things had gone ridiculous, and my dad very sadly sold this Lagonda, thinking he'd probably never be able to afford a vintage car again.
But did that at the same time, did your uncle, he had an Aston Martin Ulster, was that at the same time that you were growing up, or was that a bit later, or at the same time?
I don't know when Chris bought that. I think that would be very early 70s. I don't think it was his dowry, but he did buy it off father-in-law.
Father-in-law.
Aye, and my Auntie Sue had learned to drive in the garden in a...
We are up north.
Yeah. My Auntie Sue had learned to drive in her garden in a Aston Martin Ulster, which, you know, was quite chic, but back in those days, it was just considered an old racing car. A lovely one, but...
So your father sold the Lagonda, you moved house, you're growing up, what happened next?
Well, I did some growing up and left home, and Dad then maybe found himself with a bit more spare cash. So he bought his lovely Anzani engine, very standard 1925 Fraser Nash Supersports, which is, I guess, kind of, you know, I'd done a bit of practicing around with old cars, and my first car was a Beetle, and I always ran old cars as, you know, a form of Bangonomics, because, you know, I didn't have any money, I was young. So I ran Ford Cortinas, which I based in the Pom later as well. But then Dad got this Anzani Nash and then again got very involved with the VSCC and started going trialling in Austin 7s and trial his Nash and things. So then my involvement with the VSCC came in from just an interest in daft old cars, and then, of course, when you start driving a vintage car, and importantly, when you drive one yourself and have a go at yourself where you're allowed to play with it, at that point you get the joke, and at that point you know you want one, and you know you want to be more involved.
You get the joke?
Yeah, well, I mean, really, I had somebody a bit ago, I was a problem with this chap with a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, and he was saying to me, because he had problems with his rear tyres, because he was running these funny beaded edge things, which are quite impractical, and they'd stopped using them, really, when tarmac came out.
I've got to say, so there are some people who are listening, not looking at the video and the podcast. So Dougal has got a selection of tyres in front of him, and he's just presented me with a skinny
Model T Ford tyre, that one.
That's big.
It's called a beaded edge tyre.
Well, it's huge, but skinny.
Yeah, and so the technique of holding this tyre onto the wheel is totally impractical, and it's a very flawed technology. So the chap with the Silver Ghost had a couple of tyre failures, and I said, well, you know, you're running beaded edge tyres on a very heavy car on tarmac that's only got rear wheel brakes. And he said, are you telling me that you're selling me goods that are not fit for purpose? I said, of course I am. Your car's not fit for purpose. Can you think of any car manufacturer who would send you out with a 2-ton vehicle that only had rear wheel brakes and a tyre footprint that's 3 inches across? No! Being involved in vintage cars is a silly thing to do. People ask me, what's the sensible thing to do with this car? Sell it and buy a Nissan Micra. We're not here to be sensible. We do that from 9 o'clock till 5:30, and after that we enjoy ourselves with our vintage cars because they're fun.
I think we've got to go back a bit because you're already here talking about your tyres when really you've had a bit of a life beforehand. So let's go back a bit. Can we go back a bit?
I've not always been a purveyor of unusual rubber equipment for a gentleman to enjoy himself at the weekend. Oh, well, I fell out of school in 1985 and did a YTS as a butcher.
A butcher?
A butcher. And then I did a stream of daft rubbish jobs because I only had 1 O-level in sums. And I inherently don't really like doing what I'm told. And I think before I even did my YTS as a butcher, I set up doing a local business doing gutter cleaning. It was my first sort of business I did. And then I worked for builders, antique shops, removal companies, worked on a fishing boat out in Australia.
And you went sailing with your dad?
I used to do quite a lot of sailing as well, yeah. So my dad used to play rugby, and him and his Bezzy mate who played rugby kind of decided that when they were past 40, maybe rugby wasn't such a good idea anymore. So my dad's mate bought a yacht in Bridlington, and we used to go out racing out to Bridlington in yachts every weekend in the summer for years. And I think that's why my dad's involvement with the VSCC stopped. So I did quite a bit of that through my travelling, and then before I set up Longstone Tyres, I'd set up a business doing tree surgery, which I did for several years, and that put my wife through college to go and be a teacher, which she did, and we went racing in Bridlington every weekend and had a lot of fun doing that.
What did you race in?
A 30-foot sailing boat, IOL boats. So quite a lovely thing. I was the foredeck hand because at the time I was young and Adonis-like and fit, and I could prance around the boat like a ballet dancer instead of thundering around like a big fat Yorkshire elephant.
We need to start visualising this. Prancing around the boat like a ballet dancer with a tutu and tights, pirouetting across.
Good. Generally speaking, waterproofs. It was Bridlington after all. We're still in Yorkshire, you know.
So what was the first car that... So did your dad buy another car first, or did you buy a car first?
He bought a Austin 7 Gordon England Cup that I went trialling in.
With your dad, or without your dad?
Dad, I just go with my wife. Dad would go with, in Dennis, his Fraser Nash.
So when did your dad buy Fraser Nash?
I think it was about 92 or 3, something like that.
And then he got back involved with the VSCC, was that?
Yeah. Oh, it was like it's like a duck that had been out of water. He was straight back in there and over the moon to be, seeing old mates and going out and pressing around with these old cars and things. So, because, also, I guess by then it wasn't quite as nimble, and so for him to do the sailing and prancing around like a ballet dancer was less of an option.
So he bought the Fraser Nash. Why did he choose the Fraser Nash? Once he had the Lagonda and he went to the Fraser Nash, what was the choice of that?
Well, anybody who's seen a Fraser Nash knows why, because they're cool. And it's principally because, it's like Blue Peter, isn't it? Here's one I prepared earlier. Hopefully these lights I put here just show you the back axle of a Fraser Nash. So a lot of cars have got a diff, which means one wheel can go a different speed to the other when you go around the corner. But if you have, like this one does, just a solid beam across the back, there's no differential, so your car will just inherently drift and skid when you go around corners. Skids are cool. I sell tyres for a living. I've just got to encourage that kind of behaviour, haven't I, really? So the Fraser Nash is a delicate, light car to drive. It's got simple mechanical features to it that if you're slightly mechanically minded, you enjoy, because they're quite thuggish almost. The gear change is very fast and uncomplicated, and you can see it, which is what I like, because I'm not an engineer or anything like that. I just enjoy my mechanics. So you can see the way that a chain-driven car works and get involved in fettling it. So that side is great fun. And to drive, they're absolutely superb. The steering's fantastic. It's very direct. And if you give it some welly, then the back end steps out predictably and nicely.
And that's why you bought your one?
That's when the infection...
And what is your one called?
Mine's called Piglet. So,
why is it called Piglet?
Well, Piglet's a bit of a thug of a car because it's just got a whopping engine in the front, but it's called Piglet because the chap who built it in the first place, a guy called Roger Buxton, he was called Piglet when he was a young man because apparently he just ate everything in sight. And when you get a Fraser Nash or build a Fraser Nash, your first period with them is tricky because you're finding out how to make the thing work. And I imagine that he probably called it a pig once or twice, and that's probably why the two tied together. I mean, my first year with this car was utterly disastrous. My best result for the whole year's racing was one lap of practice at Mallory Park, which is, I think, the shortest track in the country. And it includes a series of broken head gaskets, burnt head gaskets in the pub on the Friday night before, spend all day fettling it, and then go to the track on Saturday and put a new head gasket in and blow it again on the first lap of practice. It also involved driving nearly all the way across France to go to Angoulême, stuffing it into the wall on the second hairpin on the first lap of practice. So my first year was pretty trying with Piglet.
So your first lap of practice, you stuffed it into a wall.
Yeah.
But did you get it back on the track again for the
No,
race?
because you know the design of a Fraser Nash means that your front axle is like a really fantastic crumple zone. It does absorb the impact beautifully, but it makes it quite tricky to get back. If you get a slight bend, you can bend it back into place. Possibly people have done that, but I was pretty thorough.
You didn't have spares?
Not a spare axle, no.
One for the notice board next time.
I did try bending it back because there were the Pompiers, the French fire brigade there, and they got these rather clever hydraulic jacks. So I did have a good attempt at bending it back, but it was very bent. It was very bent. So that was the end of that.
But when did you race it next? When did you race him next?
Oh, out the very next season. I generally speaking do pretty much every VSCC race meeting. And there are various other things I love going to do in my car, but I don't like missing a VSCC race meeting. They're just the best. You've got Goodwood, Silverstone Classic, but they're not a VSCC race meeting. It doesn't have that clubby feel of all your mates in the paddock together, and if you get in trouble, like I've done many times with a broken car,
everyone comes to help you.
All your mates pile in.
Because they've all got a race against somebody.
Yeah. And for a spectator who doesn't know anyone there, who goes along, he could easily find himself helping someone fix their car in the paddock. It's just such a friendly atmosphere that makes all the difference.
And it's a family atmosphere. I mean, your dad still races, and your mum goes out with the chummy ladies.
She does, yeah.
Did she have a GN to start with?
Yes, but she's very kindly given that to my wife.
So
that's in my garage at home with the cylinder heads off at the moment.
And so your wife races that?
No, this is a GN, a totally standard, just the way it left the factory, what they call an IOE GN. So the inlet exhaust is over the exhaust valve, so the compression ratio isn't anywhere near as here. All your fancy ones have got overhead valves and much higher compression. So this is absolutely the standard car as they left the factory as normal. So quite a charming, lovely thing and a nice thing to drive around in.
What, for shopping?
Yeah. Or maybe nip into the pub.
Nip into the pub?
Yeah.
And your mum drives with the chummy ladies?
She does, yes.
Does she do hill climbs as well? Or?
I don't think my mum has ever done the competitive driving, I don't think. She might have done some rallying when she was younger, but I don't think she's done much vintage stuff.
But it's a whole family event though, when you come.
Yeah.
When you go to the
it is. It is. We're really quite involved. I mean, so my uncle does it. I've got two cousins who are into Samsons. And then, of course, my uncle races as well. My auntie's got a Fraser Nash.
And your uncle has what now?
He's got a Lancia Aprilia. He
hasn't still got his Aston Martin Ulster?
No, he wanted to go faster. He flogged that and bought a Type 35B Bugatti.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
That's faster.
Because I still, if he had his Aston Martin Ulster, I would have said, right, what's his address? I'm coming round. Really quickly.
But that's still out racing. His Ulster is still out racing with a chap called, is he called Bradfield, I think? And it's a lovely car. It really is super. And he still uses it a lot, which if you're a VSCCist and you've got a car that's done a lot of racing, and if you do sell it, you'd like to sort of see it still out
there, sure
being used and for what it's designed for. I mean, all my cars get used all the time. I very rarely drive a post-war car. I drive to work and back in vintage cars nearly every day. Most of the places I go in a vintage car.
Or you're bringing them in the back of a van.
I sometimes, because now I'll be taking Liz and myself in quite a friendly caravan and possibly trying to get a child or two there with a car that they're going to race or a hill climb as well. So going to race meetings just becomes increasingly complicated because my kids are also getting involved now.
Let's talk about your kids. So,
do we have to? I was beginning to enjoy myself.
well, you can carry on talking about you again in a second. Let's go back to your kids and then we'll come back to you again. So, one of your sons has got the Austin 7 Special.
Yeah.
Is that the one that you had that he now drives?
Nope.
Tell me all about that.
I mean, Austin 7 Specials are... I don't think you find another club where it's as easy and cheap to get into motorsport. So I bought that special for Wilf for his birthday, Christmas, next birthday, Christmas, until he's 50, I think, for £6,000 when he was 14.
Actually, I think you've got a few birthday presents to catch up on. Actually.
He still gets a pack of Smarties at Christmas, and that's his lot. But I bought that for him for 14 because he was getting very involved and interested in engineering. So it's a vintage car's a brilliant way for somebody like that to get more involved.
So you've got 2 sons, right?
3.
3, but one of your sons wasn't really interested, and then you let him drive the car.
That's right. And there was no stopping. Wilf's my second one. With the Austin 7 Special, there's no stopping him. He was just going to be doing vintage cars, whether I tried to stop him or not. Whereas my eldest son, Bert, was kind of, I don't know, he wasn't mechanically minded. He did music at university. He just wasn't really interested. I guess, to a certain extent, we dragged him along to all these race meetings a little bit, where he had mates and things like that. But he kind of moved away from it, following his own thing. And then he was at home one weekend with his girlfriend, and I said, he said, I'm just popping into Bawtry to go and get a thing. And I said, well, why don't you go in the Chummy? I said, what, can I go with my girlfriend and by myself without you there? I said, yeah, sure, off you go. So, of course, in he pops, and then, an hour later, I did say, take your mobile phone, just in case. But he popped back an hour later, big beaming smile on his face, and his girlfriend was in the same state as well. And they just suddenly got the joke, they understood what it was about, because they'd been allowed to go and do it by themselves. And then later on that day, on that very day, Bert saying, can I borrow the car again? I want to take my mates out for a drive in it. And then next thing you know, there's him and a couple of these teenage lads tooling around with, one in the passenger seat, one in the back with his stuffed in there, swanking around. And a bunch of teenagers out enjoying the Chummy the way it should be enjoyed and the way that my dad learned that actually playing with vintage cars was fun. And I think, to a certain extent, we're getting to a bit of a crisis point where loads of the youngsters aren't really finding the interest in vintage cars. But to get them interested, you've got to let them do it by themselves, their own way, with their mates. If you're sat in a vintage car and Dad's looking over your shoulder, or Grandad, sucking through his teeth every time you change gear, you're not going to find it enjoyable. If Grandad or Dad takes you out, shows you how to do it, and then says, off you go with your mates, take your mobile phone, ring me up if you break down, go and enjoy yourself in the car the way it should be enjoyed, then people will enjoy doing it. Their mates will enjoy it as well, because if you take anybody in a vintage car, they get out saying, oh, I want one. But if they've not been in one, they don't know. And if you go out and drive it yourself, you really fully get it. And then when they get back in the car with Grandad or Dad when they're driving it, having crunched a few gears of their own, they'll be watching how they do it properly, and then they'll learn.
To get better.
And next time Grandad's under the bonnet thinking, I need to get this bit out of the carburettor, or, blow down the fuel feed pipe, or set the points, at that point they'll be getting involved and interested.
So we're talking about youngsters getting into their parents' and granddad's cars, but I want to go back to your oldest son. What's his story now with the car?
My first vintage car was a 1928 Model A Ford Roadster, a manky old thing that I trialled, and Bert's really getting very involved in that. I lend him that. He just uses that whenever he likes to.
Brilliant, isn't it?
So he's coming doing a few trials with that. So within vintage cars, sometimes they're complicated to fettle. This lovely old Delage of mine, if I break some complicated bits, I've got to you know, it might not be so easy to find replacement bits, or I might have to get them made or make them myself. Whereas a Model A Ford or an Austin 7, they have fantastic spare support. And actually Fraser Nash are very good as well. But you can keep these cars going. So for Bert to have a Model A Ford, which is quite a robust car, it'll cruise at 50, 55 miles an hour all day, and he can get the bits when he breaks it, and I'll help him fix it. So it's a great start for him to get involved in these things. And he, like, you know, the same thing again, they take their mates out in it, and then that hopefully, you know, hooks the next generation, because you don't know unless you actually do it yourself.
I went to the Pendine Sands hot rod races.
Oh yeah.
And the first year I went, there was lots of different age groups, but not so many youngsters. And the next year I went, there was a couple of youngsters, and then the next year I went, those couple of youngsters had 10 or 20 people all hanging around them.
Yeah.
All having such a giggle.
Well, we did some tyre testing for Pirelli a bit ago. We came and they brought some tyres over and we took them to Brighton track, which is an Ace track just up the road. And I'd hired the track for a day to test these XK Jag tyres. So I put the word out to all my mates that we've got Brighton track up for the day, come and have a go for free. So I got some very big cheeses from Pirelli there, and a load of young lads who were spanking vintage cars around Brighton track, and then we all went back to my house for dinner afterwards. And this chap from Pirelli was saying that he was astounded by the whole situation, whereby the rest of the world of motorsport is struggling to fill their grids, and they're struggling to get young people in the slightest bit interested. And here he is at a table surrounded by 10 under 30-year-old motorsport enthusiasts who are into pre-war cars. And again, that reverts back to what we were discussing earlier on, in that the VSCC is the ideal playground for a young person who wants to get involved in motorsport, because you can get an Austin 7 for not a great deal of money, and you can get half-price entries in a lot of the race meetings and hill climbs. And so that makes an entry for a young person, under 30-year-old, to go racing or hill climbing cheap. And I would imagine any other form of racing or motorsport is extremely good value and well supported and a great load of fun as well.
And I mean, you have to pay for the race, but it's a fairly economical weekend away.
Well,
fairly.
Yeah, well, I mean,
considering if you want to, you know, compared to other things you can go for festivals and things the weekends, it's fairly...
Well, when I stuffed into that wall I was telling you about,
that's
good, but, you know, that tends to have to. But if you're running Austin 7s, the parts aren't expensive. You don't use loads of petrol. Your tyres last you for ages. You can shove it in the back of a Merc Sprinter van like this. You camp in the paddock. All your mates camp in the paddock. You have a barbecue the night before. All that side of it is so self-sufficient and, you know, like a real good party event, you know, I think.
Now, we're talking about different races and different events. You run a Longstone light car and long car race, don't you? Where are these and how are they set out?
So I think when I first started going to VSCC race meetings, back when I was a young, you know, lad of about 7, cars like this Delage were out on the track racing. All sorts of other stuff was racing. There wasn't this crazy need to be competitive. There was a feeling of like a bunch of old mates wanted to go out and drive their daft old car that they love around the racetrack quite quickly and do some skids and have some fun. And so I kind of, the intention was to sort of reinvent that a little bit and hopefully get a load of people who've not recently been coming to VSCC race meetings to come back and get back involved in the fun we're having there. So I alternate them. 1 year we do the light car race, which is for standard light cars, so dismal performance, small engine.
Dismal performance?
Yes, that's the whole idea.
Is that the title, dismal performance?
No, it's no, we just call it Longstone light cars so far, you know, who can say? So the plan is that, you know, we get a load of light cars and they go and we do the last race at the meeting, because we tend to have a bit of a set to in the paddock afterwards and have a bit of a sort of party in the paddock afterwards. So you're not supposed to go racing. Say, for instance, if you drunk a couple of glasses of champagne. So it's the last race of the day. It's been at Donington the last couple of years because they've got a good pit lane. So it's a 40-minute race.
Yeah.
With a driver change, optional driver change. I think it's 70 quid.
If it's an optional, do they have to run around the car at when the
Yeah,
driver
they can do that. So I think they've got a amount of time they've got to stay in the pits for.
Right.
I think it's 70 quid per driver, and that's a 40-minute race split between two. And then Longstone pays for the grid, pays for the whole race, and the £70 from the driver goes towards the VSCC's funds as a, as a sponsorship thing. And then we have a concourse, and in the light car, there's two concourse prizes. One's for the first breakdown, and the other one's for the second breakdown. And they win a magnum of champagne. If they've broken down? Yes. They win a magnum of champagne.
So it's like wacky races gone backwards?
A little bit like that, yeah. They win a magnum of champagne. However, we've already opened the magnum of champagne and drunk half of it. Oh. And they get that, so pretty much they've principally got to share the rest of that out with their mates. So that's how the concourse wins. And then the first three cars across the finish line, disqualified for trying too hard. So our winner is the fourth place car.
Yeah.
And then the second place car is effectively fifth. And the third place car is the sixth car. And they all win half a magnum of champagne that we've already drunk half of.
So we've had to have a little gap and a stop because there was so much noise going on, which I couldn't concentrate. My hair was getting curlier and curlier and curlier. And I need to ask Dougal again what on earth the concourse is about, because it was just too completely proper confusing. Start again.
So the light car,
if you wouldn't mind.
It's the light car race. Now within the light car race, we have two concourse prizes. One is for the first breakdown, and the second one is for the best breakdown.
The best breakdown.
The best breakdown.
What, like really extravagant and really like preposterous?
Most dramatic, what's most exciting, or arguably could be the most expensive, really, couldn't it?
Oh, I love it.
One year we had a car where their tyre burst off the rim as they crossed the finish line right to the end. Obviously, they won one of the concourse prizes. Now, the concourse prize is a magnum of champagne that we've already opened and drunk half of. And then the plan is that they will then share the other half of the champagne around the pit line, which has got all the marshals and all the other competitors.
They're not going to get any of it.
All in the pit lane.
They're not going to get any of it.
No, they don't, no. But, they've already probably had the half poured out earlier on. So that poor chap who had a blowout on the finish line, we had to drink all of his for him because he'd gone to go and recover his car.
That's a shame.
And then the actual race, so Longstone Tyres pay for the grid and all of that involved in it, and then the competitors pay 70 quid per driver, and that 70 quid goes towards the club and the club funds as a form of sponsorship.
Tell me how people don't win.
Well, so one guaranteed way of not winning is trying too hard.
So they come across the finish line first?
The first three cars across the finish line.
And they really, really, really don't win?
Disqualified. Trying too hard.
Is that like a DNF as well?
Oh no, we're not. We don't persecute them. Oh. We don't quite persecute them. No. But they just don't win a half-drunk magnum of champagne like fourth, fifth, and sixth do.
So the fourth, fifth, and sixth get on a podium.
Yeah, and a half-drunk magnum of champagne. However, the people who do come first, second, and third are also in the pit lane with us, drinking the other half of that magnum of champagne. So it's a race where
it's a win-win. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Everyone's a winner.
Win-win.
So that's the light car race. We do the same thing with a long car race.
And what's a long car race?
A long car is well, there's a clue in the name. But a four-seat touring car. But if it's like an Elvis Beetle back or something like that, that's kind of all right as well. It's a non-sporty car. It's a touring car, one that you might drive around in, and not one with high performance. And it wants to be standard, and it wants to be vintage.
So we're talking Donington, aren't we?
Yeah.
And how long is a usual lap in a usual race car?
I don't know.
These
are two tricky questions. I don't know the answer to these.
I'm really sorry. So how long does the long car take, the long race car take?
It's a 40-minute race with 2 20-minute stints and a driver change in between. But I bet I could get 3 laps in this for 1 lap in that.
That's a sort of a good comparison.
That's the sort of thing you're after,
That's
yes.
the sort of comparison
Yeah.
I'm after.
So this has got a 3-litre engine in it with an overhead valve conversion and 120 brake horsepower and weighs 650 kilograms.
We're looking at the Fraser Nash here for the people who are just listening to
The
this
mighty Piglet, and this is my Delage DIS, which I don't know, I'm guessing it weighs 1.5 tons. It's got a 2.2 litre engine, and when it comes to breakout horsepower, it's got a few, not very many, but it's got a few.
It's more foot power.
Yeah.
So you can get 3 Fraser Nashes to one.
three Piglet laps to 1 Delage lap, I'd guess. Yeah,
3 Piglets to 1 Delage, and that is commentary and a half, really.
Yeah. Well, it's great fun.
Is it commentated? Do people hear what's happening on the track?
Oh, the commentators are beside themselves with excitement. As you might get 3 Austin 7 chubbies all dawdling around the corner at the same time. And the excitement's, it's nail-biting. And the pit lane's crammed full of people because actually having a driver change in a race just adds a lot more silliness to it, really. There's a lot of batting about in the pit lane. We're still racing and we're serious, we obey all the rules, we don't want anyone to get hurt. We know what we're doing, but there's a lot of giggling and fun goes on, which is a big part of it.
You say this is the last race of the day. Is that a Sunday or a Saturday at Donington? Do you remember? Does it matter?
I think it was, I can't remember.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't really matter, but the thing is that because of the prize situation we have.
It has to be the last race.
It has to be the last race because it would be inappropriate to go back out racing again after the prize giving. So, it's not the 60s anymore.
So I need to find out when the next one is because I am there.
Yeah.
And I hope everyone listening to this is going to be there because it sounds a bit bonkers.
It is mildly bonkers.
I really like it.
A lot of fun.
I really like it. Now we were talking about, it's called the Longstone long race and the Longstone light race, which leads me on to the fact that you now own Longstone Tyres.
Yep.
And you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you saw an advert on a front window at a VSCC race and in, I think, 1998, and it said, tyre company for sale, contact me. And
that's pretty much it.
And you did.
That's pretty much it. So it was at the time I was doing my tree surgery business, but that is a bit limited, and inevitably you're never going to make a huge amount of money, and there's every chance you might lose a leg or an arm. Or
not like motor racing or anything.
Well, yeah, but that's different to tyre selling. But so the tree surgery thing seemed like a little bit of a sort of. I got as far as I could get with it. So I'd talked to my dad about how I was looking for another way of running a business that might be able to be, more profitable and have a bit more, a bit less hard work, a bit less dangerous as well. So there we were at VSCC Silverstone, and it was my dad actually who spotted this A4 piece of paper just stuck on the front of Mike Hurst's Longstone Tyres, because a chap called Mike Hurst was running it before me. And then I went and worked with him for a year to see if it was going to be right, because it's not the sort of thing you can do if you can't utterly dedicate yourself to it. You have to be very dedicated. So, for my first few years, I would be working 12 hours a day, 12 days a week, 7 hours a day I was doing. But yeah, it was all very consuming for the first few years, and then my mate Simon came and worked with us, and then things developed and things like that. But the first few years were pretty intense.
So has it always been in this yard, or when did you move to this yard?
So it's called Longstone Tyres because Mike Hurst is from a village called Great Longstone, and it was a continuation. He ran a garage. And it was a continuation of his garage that was running that did vintage car tyres.
So it's about 60, 70 years old now.
That sort of thing, yeah. Well, I think Mike said he was 40 years old when I took it over back at the end of the 90s. So
I've got a bit confused because I know that the chap who owns this yard has got 1 million grandchildren and puts all their grandchildren in chummies or something.
Yeah.
So that's not the owner of Longstone Tyres. That's the owner of this yard where you are now.
Yeah. That's my uncle.
Oh, it's your uncle.
This yard here was, the name on the front of the building is John Hudson.
Uh-huh.
He's my hero granddad, who was pretty epic. He flew Lancasters out of Finley Airport, which is just down the road. He was a flight engineer, and he was in what they call the Pathfinders, who were the ones who flew out first and dropped flares, so the next batch of bombers through would know where to drop them.
He was, oh my God, he was the first. That's the treacherous one.
Yeah, and he got, well, I think they're all quite treacherous, really. quite dangerous, the war, you know.
Oh,
but anyway, he got shot down over Holland, and then he walked all the way down to Gibraltar from Holland.
Holland to Gibraltar.
Yeah.
I hope he had good rubber soles.
Yeah, and then he got a submarine back, and I think my granny thought, bloody hell, he's not dead, he's a keeper. So granny was a weather girl in Bawtry Hall. She was a wren, and they got married, and then Dar ended up setting up this place sometime later.
A weather girl?
Yeah.
What's the weather girl?
Well, she was a wren, and they were in what they call bomber command, and obviously they needed a good weather forecast. So
I see.
she was
Thank you very much.
part of that team. Yeah.
Thank you.
So John set that up, and then my mum was a company accountant next door, and my uncle Chris, CJ Hudson, who raced the Ulster Aston Martin, ran that business after my granddad retired, and now my two cousins.
He's next door.
Yeah.
Your uncle with the Aston Martin who hasn't got it anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to meet him.
Yeah. Oh well.
I like the Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, carry on. Sorry.
And now my two cousins are now running the truck business next door.
I see.
Yeah.
So it is proper family around here.
Yeah.
So what is all this about 1 million grandchildren?
Yeah, Chris had 4 sons, and I guess they were probably a bit too good looking, and that might be the cause of the problem.
Am I exaggerating about 1 million? It's quite a lot though.
14.
That's quite a lot, isn't it?
That's
14.
quite a lot.
I mean, it's nearly 1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Are they all driving chummies?
They will all be learning to drive chummies. Some of them are a bit young at the moment, but they're getting there.
So let's carry on. Now you bought this company, and it enabled you to go racing more. Stopped your tree surgery business. You moved into this.
There's been some developments over the years, so I guess to start off with, we were only really, Mike Hurst was just into pre-war cars, and my interest is pre-war cars, but the tyre business has moved on to cover a much wider field than that now. We're doing all sorts of stuff. We're up till this century now.
I did see the word Nissan on your website, along with jammy Dodgers.
Yeah, that's right. We do modern fangle stuff as well. We do tyres for cars of this century even.
So we'll have a look at those in a minute. We're going to go and have a look at the tyres sort of upstairs. But what sort of made you decide to get this business?
Well, it's because it just fits. It just fits the way I work, really, the way I like things. I'm rubbish at doing what I'm told, so I kind of need to run my own business because I've always tried to. I've had several, I've done that a few times over the years. In between things, I've set up doing tree surgery or hedge cutting or gutter cleaning, or I've always wanted to do my own thing and not work for somebody else. And then the tyres was just an opportunity, and it seemed like a good way of being involved in something that I really enjoyed as well, in going to VSCC race meetings and being involved with old cars. So it's not so vintage orientated now, this business, but I do spend my time playing with pre-war cars. I'm aware of VSCC race meeting most weekends, and I drive a vintage car pretty much every day. So there's no hope for me, really, is there?
There is. I think that's a good time to actually go and have a look at the tyres. We're going to go upstairs into his storage yard to have a look at all the different tyres. I'm upstairs now here with Dougal Cawley, surrounded by tyres, which I really loved when I got here. I was like, this is the space I want to be in.
Do you like the smell of them?
Yeah, and we're sitting on tyres. It's like we were sitting on a bouncy castle, so just to pull my jumper down. For those just listening, we are physically surrounded by tyres, all sorts of different treads of tyres. So Dougal, do you work with race cars, or do you work with road cars, or do you do a bit of both?
We sell a few race tyres, but that's not really our main market.
I'm going to take my glasses off because I don't need them.
Right, okay, yeah. No, we do the Dunlop racing range. We sell some Michelin tarmac rally tyres, historic tarmac rally tyres, and some Pirelli ones as well. But that's not really our core industry. Our core industry is trying to help people put a tyre on their car that's going to make it drive at its best. So a lot of the tyres we have here are made by genuine period manufacturers who made tyres in the day, and when you're running say a 60s or 70s car, it benefits from having a different kind of carcass structure to that of a modern car. It'll be nicer to drive.
Carcass structure, did you just say?
Yeah, so I think there's an idea among a lot of people that actually the tread pack, it's all about the tread pack of the tyre. It's actually very, very secondary. The critical thing is the actual structure of the tyre and how that works with the chassis of the car to make it drive at its best.
So I know you don't do a lot of race tyres, but I was just in my brain for a few minutes whilst you were talking about the races. I was always thinking of Le Mans, and they go around with their thermometers doing track temperatures. Do you have to think about different road surfaces and track surfaces for just normal road cars, at the temperature that the track that surfaces get to?
Not on the road. I guess the reference to that would be if you look at tyre pressure recommendations for cars back in the early days, they would often have different pressures. They would have a normal road use tyre pressure and then a high-speed tyre pressure. High-speed or fully loaded, they would say. And I would say to people these days, err towards the higher pressure, because although we moan about our motorways and the dreadful traffic, actually back up until the 60s and 70s, it would be very extraordinary for a car to be able to maintain above 60, 70 miles an hour continuously, for more than half an hour, because there were just road junctions everywhere. And, traffic lights. There weren't anywhere near as many dual carriageways and motorways as there were. And certainly not back in the 20s and 30s, the bit that we're really interested in. So err towards the higher tyre pressure is kind of like the safer thing to do. It keeps the heat down in your tyre.
And that goes back to the carcass that you were talking about of what we need today, of the dual carriageways today, and how the tyre needs to be structured.
Yeah, so if you've got a lower tyre pressure, you get more movement in your sidewall, therefore you get more friction, therefore you get more heat, which is often the cause of tyre failures. So, keep an eye on your tyre pressure. And I think, so pre-war cars cross-buy every day of the week. But for a lot of the cars from the sort of, late 50s and 60s that were on cross-buys originally, then fitting a radial tyre often makes them a lot more suited to our modern roads.
And can you explain, oh, you're right then, can you explain the difference for our listeners and viewers, the difference between cross-ply and radial?
Oh, well, we could possibly even go a little bit.
Oh, I've looped
into
a link here. We are going to be looking at some...
So, because it's a VSCC, we could go earlier. So what you've got is your earlier pneumatic tyres, obviously start off with the solid, but your earlier pneumatic tyres were what they call beaded edge tyres. So a beaded edge rim is hooky shaped like that, if you like.
Hooky?
Yeah, I made that word up.
So we have to describe what we're doing, because we've got listeners as well, not just viewers. Describe your hand action.
That would be like an oval with the top bit cut out for the tyre to go in.
Perfect, carry on.
So the hooky bits I'm trying to describe, the rounded edges to the inside of the rim.
I'm falling down my tyre.
Oh, I'm sorry about that, love.
Carry on.
Do you want a different size?
No, you just carry on.
So what I've got here is a Model T Ford tyre. And for those who can see, you can see a big lump of rubber on the inner circumference of the tyre.
Which joins up to the metal rim or the wooden rim.
It hooks into those hooky bits I was trying to describe earlier.
Oh, with the cut off
Yeah.
bit at the top.
So that lump, what they call the bead of the tyre, the inner circumference of the tyre is generally called the bead, but this lump of rubber locates in that rounded hooky section on the edge of those rims. And then you put an inner tube in it, and then you inflate it to a very high pressure, because it's the pressure inside that inner tube that presses that lump of rubber into that rim, and it presses all this, the heel of that bead, onto the rim as well, and that's what holds it on. Now, that was all well and good when cars were only doing lower speeds and not getting hot.
Are we talking vintage?
Vintage.
We're not talking Edwardian.
Edwardian and veteran.
Because that's sort of 14 to 20 miles an hour.
Up until about 1924, cars ran beaded edge tyres, nearly all of them. And in about 1924, tarmac was becoming more a thing on the roads.
Should have bought shares in tarmac, eh?
Should have bought shares in tarmac. In about 1924 would have been the time to do it. But by the end of the 20s, most roads were tarmacked. So that beaded edge tyre that I was showing you started becoming obsolete in about 1924. And by about 1927, very, very few cars would fit a beaded edge tyre, because, among other things, the tarmac allowed you the ability to go faster.
Yes.
And if you think about it, the side forces on tarmac compared to a dirt track surface are dramatically greater. So as you go around a corner and you get a side force on your tyre,
yeah,
then on a loose surface road, when that force became great, the car would slip a little bit. So it was like a self-governing side force. It would diminish the side forces by the car sliding a little bit. But now we're in a situation where that dramatic amount of extra grip caused by a good, strong, solid surface like tarmac meant the side forces were greater. And this bead on the tyre can rip off the tyre and just go bang, or pull out of the rim and just go bang. Because
of the force that
yes.
the tarmac's giving.
Yeah, and if you look back at the Edwardian periods and the veteran periods of their road races they were doing at the time, then often the actual results of the race were determined by who had the most punctures, because you just had to stop and fix it on the side of the road.
It's sort of a bit like Formula One, really, isn't it, when they're just talking about tyre pressure the whole time? Slicks, you know, what they're putting on.
I guess so. That's, it was all part of it. And, maybe racing's not changed that much.
Nothing's changed. Can you tell me one thing before we move on to the next era? We have got a very noisy drill.
That's a grinder next door. He's prepared
Can
to
you
weld.
hear me? I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Which means everyone can hear us.
Well, that's all fine.
That's all fine. Okay, so before we go on to the next era, when did the white walling stop because of the streetlights and things?
I'm not sure why walling has stopped. It's not fashionable anymore.
Because of the streetlights?
Well, no. White walling is fashion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's fashion. Yeah. I'm not sure about the streetlight thing. White wall's fashion. Back in the war, they would paint you paint the tips of your wings of your car white because you didn't drive around with headlights on in the war.
Oh.
But yeah, so we still deal with white wall tyres.
Okay.
I've got it's in a blue feet away.
We've just moved the camera.
I've just moved the
So I
camera.
might be crooked or I might be straight. Who knows?
I've just moved the camera. But yeah, so that's a white wall tyre. This is for 70s Mercedes.
70s, 1970s.
1970s Mercedes and Tram Stags and things like that in that size. So we still do white wall tyres, but it's just kind of, I don't know, it's not fashionable anymore. It's
Okay.
no longer all the rage.
Okay.
But if we're moving on to the next era,
Let's move on to the next era.
in a Blue Peter fashion as well, here we go. This is your early Silver Ghost tyre.
That's enormous.
Big and tall and thin, isn't it?
I mean, so it's wider than my body. It's really big. It's a really big tyre.
It's a really big, tall tyre.
I mean, it's a tyre sort of for. I don't know what car it's for.
It's about 3 feet in diameter.
It's about 3 feet in diameter.
I think the internal diameter would be 2.5 feet, the hole in the middle for the rim.
I've got to move. I have to move to be in the camera.
The
oh my
tyre
God.
section, the width of the tyre at its fattest point is 135 millimetres, which is 5 inches, 5.5 inches.
135 millimetres is 13.5 centimetres for those of us that know a bit of A4.
And then I think your footprint on that is probably, I don't think that's even 3 inches wide, is it? It might be 3 inches wide.
It's not as wide as my hand.
No. So you had so Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost would be weighing a couple of tons.
Is this a Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost tyre?
It is, yeah. So that's a pre-1924 one. That's a pre-1924 one. And then, after that, like I was saying earlier on, because of all this tarmac around...
You've got to be careful with all my electrics around here.
Silver Ghost would move on to something like this, which is a 721. So it's about the same diameter, but the rim would be a 21-inch rim.
We've gone fatter.
It's a lot fatter, so you've got a lot more sidewall height to it. So that would absorb the bumps of the roads better, and it could run at a lot lower pressure.
Are we on a Silver Ghost again?
Still on Silver Ghost.
Gosh.
And then this one, what's that? Is that a 5 or 6 inch wide footprint?
It's nearly as fat as wide as my hand.
Yeah, so you've got an awful lot more grip there, a lot more give in the sidewall of the tyre. The tyre will be able to absorb the bumps of the roads.
It's quite squishy.
Yeah. So what we've got now is the inner circumference of that tyre has got a wire inside it. So that means that this circumference here can never expand and become bigger than the flanges on the outside of the rim. So this tyre can never just go bang and fall off. It'll never fall off like those beaded edge tyres do.
And remind me again, or say for the first time if you hadn't said it before, what year is this kind of thing?
So this is late 20s.
Wow.
2024, 25-ish. Rolls-Royce were moving away from beaded edge tyres and moving on to cross-plies. In the days when they were fitting these beaded edge tyres, when they constantly were going bang and falling off, because the technology never has one. It's not really very good way of putting a tyre in a car. Back in those days, because they would regularly have punctures, they were desperate to move back to solid tyres. So in the veteran days and the early car days, they were coming out with all sorts of really complicated wheels to try and take over the job of having a pneumatic tyre. So the pneumatic tyre takes away a vast amount of the vibration in the car. And of course, vibration is terrible because it makes so many other things break. So the tyre, it's not just there to make it comfortable and luxurious for us, it's there to mean that the rest of the car can actually work, because otherwise it all falls apart if you're vibrating around on a coarse road.
Oh, I know about that, because my condenser broke and my whole car shook to pieces, and now my third collar of my gearbox is broken because of shaking and vibration.
So I tell you what, actually, while we're on that subject, it is a thing I often deal with people who are doing endurance rallies and things like that. And there's a movement out there where some people like to put on a van tyre or a more robust tyre. Well, it's completely the polar wrong way to go. What you're doing in that case is you're taking away the job the tyre's supposed to do. It's a little bit like putting a rusty nail in instead of a fuse. Because what happens is instead
that's completely a different analogy though.
Well, because instead of your tyre taking the vibrations and roughness out of the road, then you pass that on to your car.
To another you've moved the problem
So something
along.
else breaks instead. Like, your fuse is supposed to go before you blow up your starter motor or your headlight.
Just change
That's
the fuse.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
And your tyre is supposed to be there as your first line of defence. And you've put a more robust van tyre on, or one with an extremely high load rating, then all you're doing is you're passing on all that vibration onto your car. So really, stick with a tyre that's got a reasonably appropriate load rating to your car. If you're going on these long endurance rallies, actually a puncture's not really the end of the world. It's better than a broken spring. And you can fix a puncture.
And you can just take a few spare tyres on your roof.
Exactly. It's a false economy.
Where are we? We're at the.
So we've done Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost, haven't we?
Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost.
So
we've done a bit of posh.
Yeah, done a bit of posh. Well, this one's posh.
Oh, we got posh again.
This is another. So we are currently working with Pirelli at the moment. Pirelli are really getting very, very involved in there.
So we have a Pirelli tyre in front of us, and it's like a sort of a diagonal edge, sort of. It's not as rounded edge as those other two that we've seen.
No.
And it's a flat
footprint.
Flat footprint. Yep. A modern footprint to me, and it's not as wide as my hand.
So this is a high performance cross-ply tyre. It's what they call V-rated, so it's rated to 150 miles an hour. So for a cross-ply tyre, and for a pre-war car, that's pretty good. So
150 miles an hour. That's
150 miles an hour.
That's hold on to your knickers.
But of course, Pirelli are very excited and interested in the Italian car market and what goes on there. So this is made for your 1930s Alphas. The stuff we all really drool about.
Targa Floria.
And
Mille.
yeah, that sort of thing. Your 6C Alphas and the Maseratis of the period. Also, Ultra Aston Martins, Type 57 Bugattis, 3.5 litre Bentleys.
Type 57 Bugattis.
Yes.
I can't see it on a Type 57 Bugatti.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that my little
Well,
blinkered eyes?
Just pop to the Slump Museum and you'll see loads of the cars in the Slump Museum fitted with that exact tyre, because that is the performance tyre. That's that's Pirelli's good stuff. So that's that's new. That's hot off the press. Another one we did is this one over here, and this is one of our own brand.
Hang on. So we've done the beaded tyres and we're on the cross plies.
Yeah.
What was the Rolls Royce Ghost tyre?
That was beaded edge.
That was beaded
The
edge.
first one was beaded edge, and then that's cross ply.
Then we've gone to cross ply, and we're still on cross ply.
That's cross ply, and this is cross ply as well. So this tread pattern is a Dunlop tread pattern from 1924 through till about 1934-ish.
This seems a lot more familiar to me for vintage cars.
Austin 7. So we got an original Austin 7 20s tyre and sent it to our tyre manufacturer and asked him to make us a car like this, and we were quite descriptive.
A tyre?
Yes,
not a car.
Yes, that's right, a tyre, yes.
Yeah.
Right. So this is an Austin 7 tyre, and really, we've all got Austin 7s in our family and we're all running on these. A lot of the other tyres available in this size are a bit more, they've got a bit more of a motorbike carcass structure, a bit softer.
I'm just moving into the centre of the tyre because you were blocking my view. And that's good. That's a good tyre you can play with.
Yeah, so that's Austin 7
Am
tyre.
I sitting on one of them?
No, what you're sitting on.
Oh, I'm sitting on a Pirelli.
You're sitting on a Pirelli Centerato CN54.
That's so,
Yes, this one
it's so small.
is a Fiat 500 tyre.
My.
So this was being made by a budget brand, and we recently managed to get Pirelli to make it as a proper Pirelli again, as the real thing. So that's quite a good tyre that we were, very involved with Pirelli doing, which is brilliant news.
Fiat 500. That's such
Fiat
a
500.
sweetie.
Cinquecento.
Cinquecento.
And then this one's another tyre
All right.
that we also managed to get Pirelli to make. So this one
It's a fatty.
is quite an exciting tyre.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
It's absolutely very, very exciting.
Didn't mean to say you're a fatty. There's no offence to you, but you were bigger than my hand.
Yeah, it's possibly only exciting to boring anoraks like myself. But that tyre,
Give me the sizes.
that is a 205/15. So more modern tyres will have like a 205/70/15 or 60/15.
Are we on cross ply or radial now?
We're on early radials.
Okay.
So Pirelli started making radial Centerato tyres in 1952. Michelin started the Michelin X. Actually, during the war, they invented the radial tyre, but they didn't release it or patent it because at the time Michelin was under Nazi control and they didn't want to patent it under Vichy control. So they waited till after the war and they were liberated, and then they patented the radial tyre in 1946, and it came out for sale throughout the 40s and was quite a commonplace tyre by 1949. And Pirelli did the Centerato, which was a sports car variety of a radial tyre. And then in 1964, they developed the ability to make a 205 section tyre, i.e. a tyre as fat as this. In fact, this tyre. They developed the ability to make this tyre, such a big tyre, that was capable of doing 150 miles an hour in all the supercars of the day, like the...
Who is
like
this
the
for? Yeah.
Ferrari 500 Superfast, Maserati Ghiblis, Lamborghini Miura, all the top-notch Italian sports cars of the period were fitting this tyre between 1964 and about 1968. But because 70 profile and low profile tyres became available, so many of those cars for years have been fitting later wrong size tyres because this had become obsolete and wasn't made anymore until we recently got involved with Pirelli making that tyre again. So you can see how excited I am about that one. And at this point, I'd quite like to, apologise to my poor wife because I regularly bore her within an inch of her life. We can go to a lovely sort of boating marina where there'll be some beautiful boats around, and I'll be walking around the quays going, oh yes, that's very interesting, 16515 for a VW Beetle. Look at that fascinating tread band. And my poor wife, she has to put up with that because, I could, when it boils down to it.
But she is walking around a lovely marina or something.
Well, there is that, I suppose, yeah. She
what we got
probably
next?
wishes with somebody else. So, I thought this is an interesting contrast because, we've got this one here and that one there. So this skinny one here is Model T Ford, and then this big whopping silly thing here, the big silly thing here.
Formula One.
Well, no, that's the back of a Lamborghini Countach.
Oh, it can't be Formula One. They're much bigger than that.
Yeah, well, similar size, but it's quite an outrageous tyre.
Lamborghini Countach.
Lamborghini Countach, the rear of it. Yep.
345-35 VR15.
Oh, so we're into modern tyre talk now. So 345 means 345mm width.
Width?
The width of the tyre at the fastest point again. Not the tread, the fastest point.
It's like two of my hands.
That's over a foot. 335mm wide is it's 14 inches, isn't it?
Put your foot on top of it.
That's a size 11.
Oh, it's longer than your foot.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's 14 inch. 14 wide. And then the 35 means that 35% of 345 millimetres is the height of the sidewall. That there is 35% of 345 mil. So about 100 mil, about 4 inches.
They've gone really geeky, haven't they?
That has got quite anarchy.
That's really geeky.
I mean, let's go back to those ones where it's a 5.5 by 18, 5.5 inches big, 18-inch wheel. That's simpler, isn't it? Pre-war's better.
I think we've done the wheels.
Yeah, your eyes are glazing over.
I feel like your wife at the marina. We're stopping there. I need a coffee. I got any jammy dodgers?
Yeah, we do, yeah.
We're stopping. Dougal, thank you. I'm glad we sat up here. Wait. I can see over there some tyres with V's on them. What are the V's? There's V's. V.
You see, you've fired up the anorak again. That is a Michelin TRX. Again, utterly fascinating.
What's it for?
Fascinating.
What's it for?
It's a new 1974. Well, in 1974, it was the height of development of tyre low-profile technology.
And on that note,
yeah,
I'm cutting. Right, welcome back to part 3 with Dougal Cawley of Longstone Tyres, and we're here in his garage at home, and I'm surrounded by a dead stoat, which is of interest. And we're also, I'm standing in front of a car that our filmmaker, Ollie Lesson's grandfather used to race or drive. Can you tell me about this?
Unfortunately, not that exact one, because it would be extremely cool if it was Daddy-O. But this is a Lotus Elite, 1959. This car raced and crashed in 1960 in the Goodwood TT.
TT is a good race to crash in, though. Come
exactly, on. Yeah. And that one was won by Sterling Moss. But this car, did some of that race. And I share this car with a good mate of mine called Mark Groves. And we race that a little bit as well as doing pre-war stuff. Pre-war's really my bag. It's all about the vintage cars with me. But actually, this is a pretty fab thing because Lotus in those days was ace. It was all like, just a small British business going up against the big boys of motorsport. And Lotus were really quite something.
And can you tell our listeners who are not looking, this is a Lotus what, please?
A Lotus Elite, 1959, or a Mark 14 it was also called. Extremely pretty. It's a very pretty little shape. Remarkably designed by the accountant, I think. Well, not what you would expect, but it is a gorgeous looking car.
For an accountant.
Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely shape, and and watching them race as well. They're kind of, there's all the big boys with much bigger engines. This has got little 1200cc Coventry Climax engine, but in 1959 they were doing 130 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight on a 1200cc engine, and battling with all the big boys there, much bigger engines. So it's quite a fab thing. It's a real top bit of British car design.
And for the character and robust nature that you are, to fit into this car, it's absolutely, it sort of embodies you, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of all right when I'm in there.
How do you get in and out?
Well, it's not pretty, shall we say. It's not a pretty sight. Because it is fiberglass. And, motorsport is dangerous. So I have got a rather epic roll cage in there. And then when I'm racing as well, of course, I've got my helmet on to make it more difficult. And the roll cage does make the door aperture a little bit smaller, so it isn't a pretty sight, scampering in and out of that one. But
let's move on. Now, you're leaning against what? And what is this?
It's very,
blue.
very old. This is my most recent purchase. This is a Peugeot Quadrilette, and that's the original from the horn.
So the hood,
but the rubber's just perished to that.
It's completely spent, and it looks like some gooey.
It does look quite dodgy, doesn't it?
Thing.
But I like it, so it's all part of it. But this is totally original. So it's got these lamps here are acetylene lamps.
Acetylene lamps.
Yeah.
So you like them?
Well, they're just original and very early.
Do you ever like them?
I haven't lit them because there are, already ample ways to burn your garage down without needing to use potentially sort of fire hazard headlights as well. But that's quite delicious. And
what's behind here?
Well, look at this, my luggage. This is the luggage section in here.
I'm looking behind the seat of the driver, which is on the left-hand side, I must remember.
Jack in it, a spare in a tube, emergency scarf, a little bottle of something in case you break down and you have to wait for the RAC truck to turn up.
And you've got a beautiful two signs on the air, et dernier.
Yep.
I love it.
Again, all really beautifully original.
What year is this, please?
This is it's all quite exciting. It's registered 1921, but actually the model that this is of didn't start till 1922, which is quite amusing, isn't it? But it's a 161E, I think it is, a Quadrilette.
Quadrilette.
So the first Quadrilettes came out with tandem seats, so the passenger seat would be behind the front seat.
Okay.
That's cool, isn't it?
But now we're slightly behind.
Now we're slightly behind and offset. So sat in the passenger seat here is absolutely loads of room.
You can just leisure out.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Just lay back.
And then it's all quite sophisticated because you've got a sequential gearbox.
What, 1920 what?
1922. Well, I think the sequential gearbox and these was even earlier than that.
Okay.
So a sequential gearbox, you just go through 1, 2, 3 straight through it, and then the gearbox is in the back axle, which is also very racy to have the nice balance of the car and move the weight backwards. So it's quite a lovely thing, and it's very dainty and delicate. It's not extremely fast, but who cares?
But you don't even need to know, because you can't even know.
No, I've got this, look. I've got a glove compartment, look. That's pretty much it on the dashboard.
You can...
on-off button.
Is there a petrol pump or something?
No, gravity fed. Petrol's in here, and the carburettor's down here. For a bit of fun, I could show you the...
We're sort of describing where the bits and pieces of the car for those listening, but it's tricky to explain everything. And then, we're looking in the engine now.
Buried down at the very bottom of the engine bay is a little tiddly-widdly engine there. It is just bigger than the Magneto. Slightly bigger than the Magneto.
Yeah. Oh, it's very sweet. It's just pure... It just reminds me of a... Stripping. Reminds me of a...
Oh. Did I not turn the petrol off? Tusk. Well, I was out in this... was it yesterday or the day before?
Because you drive your cars just generally to the park and around anyway.
Yeah.
You just drive all the time. Let's keep moving on. Turn your petrol off.
It's turned off.
Oh, it's still dripping.
I like a car that can still leak even when the petrol's turned off.
At least you know there's liquid in there. Now, we're going to come to this little beauty.
This little cheeky monkey.
It's very low down.
Lower than a snake's ass, I think is what they say.
Can you tell me what car this is, please? What year and what model?
This is the Austin 7 Penetrator Special.
Penetrator Special?
Yep, I think it's 1928. On the bright side, we did manage to restrict Will from calling it the Impregnator. So it is slightly toned down. This is the car I bought for him when he was 14. And, he's turned it into, quite a good race car. He's recently built the engine himself. Will's
and
now
it's got
21.
the dead stoat on the front.
It's got either a stoat or a weasel. I think Will's 21 now. Yeah, that's
what a good car for a 21-year-old.
Yeah, it's ace. It's very cool.
It's really sweet. So does he drive this around other times other than racing?
Yep. Drives to and from the race meetings sometimes. Spanks around at college with it every now and again. So now...
That's hilarious, isn't it? Because going to college with a really rusty exhaust pipe is hilarious.
Yeah. But so now, though, he's enjoying driving Piglet, which I'm not sure is a good idea. Sounds like he's having far too much fun. But now, my wife, Liz, she wasn't so keen on driving Piglet. Piglet's a bit of a beast, to be honest with you. But she's now enjoying driving the Austin 7. So Liz is enjoying driving this car with a couple of other... one of our mates has got some young daughters who are starting to get involved in motorsport. So they're hill climbing this with Liz, and me and Wilf are sharing the Fraser Nash.
Amazing. Let's move on to this next car. Tell me what it is, what year, what make, what model, everything about it, including the rucksacks and where it's just been coming back from.
Well, that rucksack is what we used when we travelled around Australia when I was 21.
Oh, that's really old.
It's really old. But this is the standard IOE GN we were talking about earlier on. This is the car that used to be my mum's, and she gave it to Liz on... I can't remember if she gave it to Liz on her 40th birthday or on our wedding anniversary. On our 25th wedding anniversary. But so this is the standard GN. We've got a bit of a problem. The cylinder heads have got dodgy valve seats. So it's in the middle of a fettle. It will be out again soon.
Taking the rucksack off of the seats and then removing the luggage rack lid, because I think...
Are you going to hop in?
Because I think the seats need to be preserved.
Well, that's genuine 1980s vinyl there, isn't it?
Oh.
Well, I tell you what we could do, though, because we've got some filming going on. Here's the cylinder head that's broken. Okay, so that's there's the valve down there.
Yeah.
And can you see that there? That bit of metal there?
There's a bit of
that's
metal
the valve
inside, a bit of
seat. That valve seat is supposed to be nicely located in here so that valve fits in it nicely and doesn't let any gases through, but the whole valve seat's popped out. So we're getting some new cylinder heads for this and this car.
Great.
Drumhouse, as it's called, will be out again soon.
Drumhouse. This car's called Drumhouse.
It's called Drumhouse because my mum bought it on the side of the Drumhouse hill at a trial.
Love it. Now, the dash is very, very minimal. It's got one dial on the left, which seems to be a clock.
Yeah.
It's not even a car thing. And the middle dash is amps, I think.
Yeah, that is supposed to show you how much charge is going in, but it often shows you how much charge is going out as well. It does both jobs.
So, of course, we don't have a speedometer or a revometer or a petrol gauge or a water gauge or a temperature gauge or a
I think this car would probably do 50. This car might have been able to do 50, if you really give it big beans.
So?
I think you could possibly get 50 out of this, all in, giving it everything.
But happily at 40,
Yeah,
comfy.
yeah.
And so has it been...
I think this one, you're ringing its neck at about 35.
Oh, so fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this GN, this Tourer, has it been on long distances or just in the short trials and the short...
I think my mum drove it from Paris halfway across France. Where did she go to?
Oh.
But she was...
It's an experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
think she drove down to the Pyrenees.
But
it has done a long journey. I've not driven it a huge amount because there is a fine line with the GN about whether you're running in or wearing out. So, I do love my light cars. A Chummy is an ace that you can jump in and use, and it's a less high maintenance car to use. But this has been a little bit less reliable, so I haven't done any major adventures in this yet.
And have you done adventures in the Peugeot?
I've done light car events, and I've also raced in the Longstone light car race in that car as well.
So
I've done the Longstone light car race in this too.
Have you won half a bottle of champagne, or have you drunk half a bottle of champagne?
I may have done the second one.
Well
Certainly
done.
wasn't winning.
Well done for losing.
Certainly wasn't winning. That would be embarrassing.
Well done for losing. Amazing. It's so beautiful. I'd like to, if we can have the camera on this Peugeot sign, look at the beautiful, beautiful Peugeot sign. It's so Art Nouveau. It's just gorgeous.
It's a lovely thing.
1920...
22, I think.
22.
Yeah.
I really, really want to drive in this car. It's
Oh, well,
just so
you know, we
stunning.
probably could do a thing, couldn't we? We might. It should just.
I really like it. Listen, we need to wrap up. We
Well,
need to stop.
Well, let's
And I
let's-
think
let's see if we can
if we
show
can get
off
it
with this.
started, perhaps.
That'd be quite good, wouldn't
And
it?
then we might have to stop, I reckon. How is the petrol doing?
Petrol is there now.
It is pouring
what
out
I'm
like
going to do is
crazy.
I'm going to do a little bit of this. Look.
It's dripping out like crazy.
That's good. That's good. Where is it? So that's no. Click 1, 2. Oh, let's get another one just for good measure.
Dougal's just pumping the petrol, I think.
Well, I was putting a bit of throttle on there. Oh no. Oh no. This isn't going very well, is it?
Might not start. It was an ad hoc request.
No, that's not going to start.
No, we'll stop.
Bit of choke.
Well, I'm going to choke. Well, it has, but
Bit of
it
hand.
won't need choke. I think I've flooded it. I'm going to go back.
We're going to have one more go, and then we might just pretend.
Oh. No, it's not having, is it?
Well,
Stuff it.
Dougal, that was a good try.
That was exciting, wasn't it?
Do you need to turn anything off?
I'll turn the petrol back off again.
Yeah. Oh, Dougal, this has been superb. Thank you so much.
No problemo.
Thank you so much. I wonder if that might have been the problem.
No, that's out of my tractor.
Oh, all right. We're going to say thank you, and I'm just going to not nick his spark plug. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Shake that.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely.
Lovely to see you.